Hello my small fat adapted family and welcome back to my channel. The Great British Bake Off is back. For anyone that doesn't know, the Great British Bake Off is a reality TV show where non-professional British people who enjoy cooking and baking compete in weekly challenges of cooking, and at the end there's a winner. Well, I'm British, I like cooking and baking, and I like a challenge. So why not join in on this? Listen. Okay, right. The Great British Bake Off came back on Tuesday. If I've timed this correctly, mine will be coming out on Sunday. And that's much too late for when I want this video out. Now there is a reason for this. I've already done this video. I had a different format where I was coming to it completely blind and my mum was going to be judging me, but there were just so many technical issues, things like out of sync audio and out of focus camera for 99% of it. I really don't want you guys to miss out on this, but I'm going to be re-recording this in a slightly sort of different format. First and foremost, before I jump into anything, make sure you check out Ginger, also known as Keto in the UK. Make sure you check out her Great British Bake Off keto playlist, because without her genius idea I wouldn't be stood here doing this. Now each week of the Great British Bake Off has a different challenge, and week number 1 is cakes. There were 3 options. The first option was to make any fruit cake I wanted. Well, I'm still the keto kitchen, so that's not happening. Option number 2, which was the technical challenge, was making angel cakes or angel slices, not to be confused with angel food cake. And option number 3, which is the showstopper, was to make childhood dream cakes, and they were, you know, whatever cake you wanted, but they had a lot of decoration and toadstools and things with fondant that I just wasn't going to be able to replicate. So for week 1 of the Great British Bake Off, I am going to be ketofying angel cakes or angel slices. The most important things when it comes to these angel cakes, these angel slices, are the 3 tiers of flavoured Genoese sponge, which is a very fluffy cake, the Italian meringue buttercream in the middle, and the feathered frosting on the top. For the Genoese sponge, you will need 56 grams of unsalted butter divided into 3 bowls, so that'll be 18.5 grams per bowl, melted and left to cool at room temperature. 113 grams of almond flour, 1/4 cup of sweetener. If you're using erythritol, that is 50 grams, 3 eggs, 23 grams of whey protein unflavoured. I use my protein, I absolutely recommend it. You can get it in UK and USA. Brilliant stuff, really low carb. 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1/2 teaspoon and 1/4 teaspoon of raspberry flavouring, 1/2 teaspoon of lemon flavouring or 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, pink food dye, yellow food dye. You can use gel, paste or liquid dye, but your results may vary. I'm using a paste for both of the dyes. And butter or oil for greasing the tin, and I'm using 100% coconut oil spray. For the Italian meringue buttercream, you will need 1/4 cup of sweetener. If you're using erythritol, it's 50 grams, 3 tablespoons of water, 1 large egg white, 85 grams of unsalted butter that has been softened at room temperature, and a sprinkle of Guar gum or Xanthan gum. I'm personally using Xanthan gum. For the feathered glaze, you will need 2 tablespoons of water, 1/4 cup of powdered sweetener. I am using powdered erythritol, and that is 43 grams, and pink food dye. Now, in terms of equipment you're going to need, 2-in-1 parchment or a sheet of parchment paper and a sheet of tin foil. You're also going to need a stand mixer, a 33 by 25 centimeter traybake tin, or whatever you have that's closest to it. I'm using a casserole dish because I don't have any kind of baking tin. A sugar thermometer, a small piping bag fitted with a medium writing nozzle, or failing that, just a kitchen bag that will later just snip a little corner of it off, and a cocktail stick. Some really important notes just before we get into this. Firstly, this recipe will not be as fluffy as a high carb Genoese sponge. I've done the best I can without making it too eggy or making it too flat or anything like that, but fluffiness, there is fluffiness, there absolutely is, but it is not on the same level as a high carb cake. It's just not going to happen on this diet. Number 2 is that you need to measure these ingredients out into grams or ounces. For a recipe like this that is an absolute faff, you need to use measurements, not to volumes like you do in cups, because it is far more accurate. I have used cups with the sweetener, but this is just because depending on what sweetener you use will completely depend on how much volume it has. You know, 50 grams in erythritol could be 100 grams in xylitol in terms of being in half a cup. And the last thing is that this whole recipe, like always, is in the description down below this video. I've put it as simply as I can down below if you want to give it a go at making your own keto angel slices. Let's get to cooking. To the side of me here, you might have noticed that I have a saucepan on a hot plate, and what I'm doing here is I've just got water in this saucepan, and I'm just going to let that heat up until it's at a gentle simmer. Before I forget, make sure that you heat your oven up. That would have been an absolute disaster. You want to put it on 180 C or 325 Fahrenheit. If you're using a fan oven, put it on 170 Celsius. Now that my water is at a really gentle simmer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my 3 eggs on the top of it, just like that. I'm just going to give them a quick whisk together, and then I'm going to add my erythritol. So this is the first step to making the Genoese sponge, and these are just going to be whisked together until all of the sweetener has melted into the egg. The egg's, you know, lightly beaten, and this will get up to a temperature of 43 Celsius or 109 Fahrenheit, and that is why you need a sugar thermometer for this. So we're on 39 at the moment. Oh, 41, it's going up pretty darn quick. 42, I'm going to take it off just a little bit early because it's in a metal bowl, so I know it'll hit what it needs to hit. Now with this, all we're going to do is transfer that into a bowl that can go on the stand mixer. What's going to happen is that this is going to be put on the stand mixer, and it's going to have the living hell beaten out of it until these eggs are all puffy and risen, and when I stop the mixer, this sort of ribboning effect sits on top of the mixture. But before I do that, I'm going to take you through the next step that you will be doing whilst this is going. But from my last video, I learned that you put a mixer on and you try and talk over it, all you're going to hear is just so I'm going to show you what you're doing with the dry bit whilst this is mixing. This bit's super simple anyway. You want to take a bowl and have scales ready with the bowl on it. You're going to take your almond flour, put that in the bowl. You're then going to take your whey protein and put that in the bowl as well. So this will give you 136 grams. Make sure you write that number down because you're going to need it in a minute. 136 grams. So now, once you've written your number down, just give that a real quick stir, make sure it's all well combined. So now that this is all nice and well combined, we're going to put it in 3 separate bowls. So that's why you needed the number from earlier. We want this all to be measured the same. So we have 136 grams divided by 3, which will give us 45.3 grams. I'm just going to go with 45 grams per bowl. I wouldn't take my measurement, I'd do your own, because you might just have different flour or different whey that is a little bit heavier, a little bit lighter, will change the results. So make sure you take down the number of the ingredients mixed together, you divide it by 3, and you measure that out into 3 separate bowls. Just off of camera, I've got 3 bowls of the almond flour mixture, well combined, measured out, beautiful. The next step is to get your 3 divided bowls of butter and your flavourings. And all you're going to do is, in your 3 bowls of butter, you're going to put vanilla in one, raspberry in the other, and lemon in the last. And then I'm just going to give all of them a mix. With the 3 of them all mixed up and ready to rumble, we take the vanilla, we put it to the side, we don't need it, so we're left with the raspberry and with the lemon. These are the 2 that we're going to colour. You don't need very much. It will go lighter, of course, because you're adding it to what is going to be fluffy, beaten eggs. So don't worry if it's too dark. You just want to make sure you've got different colours in your different layers of your Genoese sponge. So then that is our raspberry butter mixture, and that will be set aside. Let me go get another spoon, and we're just going to do the same with lemon, but with yellow. So for the lemon one, again, I'm using just a little bit of a different paste for this one. And it doesn't have to be really heavily coloured. You just want it to be yellower than your vanilla one. It's kind of really up to you, because at the end of the day, we ain't getting judged by Prue and Paul Hollywood. That is my lemon butter, nice and yellowy coloured. That's getting popped to the side. That is all you do for the dry ingredients, and you do that when your eggs and sweetener are being beaten, but of course mine aren't being beaten because you wouldn't be able to hear me. I'll be back with you when the eggs are ribboning. You see the way when it falls, if it wants to fall, you see the way it ribbons across it like that. Watch this drop. You see that? How it just ribboned across it then? That means that these eggs are ready to go to the next step. So my eggs are now nice and ribboned, they're nice and fluffed up, and all I'm going to do is transfer them into 3 separate bowls. I would actually suggest you just do this by eye, because I have tried doing it, measuring it, and it didn't actually give me accurate results, and I had some of this left over. 1 scoop at a time into each bowl. Now can you see with my spoon I'm getting really low to the bowl, and the reason I'm doing this is because the last thing I want after I've just spent however long beating this is for it to collapse because of the height. You'll see it'll naturally collapse somewhat anyway, but you know, where you could prevent it, I would. So just try and get that spoon nice and low, be very soft and gentle doing this so you don't mess anything up. I'm just going to work with 1 bowl at a time for each flavour of the Genoese sponge, starting with vanilla. So the first thing you want to do is take your almond mixture, get a sieve and sift the mixture on. Now the reason we sift it on is because what happens is if you don't sift it on, you drop it in and it's very heavy, and all it does is just collapse that egg that you've just so lovingly whipped into what it is. With our almond mixture sifted on top, what I'm going to do is fold this almond mixture that's sat on top in. It will collapse quite a lot, and unfortunately there's nothing we can do about this because we're using keto flours, and keto flours are a lot denser than high carb flours. To prevent it as much as possible, take your time. Just take your time doing it. There's no rush. So then what you've got is this kind of still fluffy, but not anywhere near as clean and fluffy, well mixed egg mixture. And the last thing we need to do with this is, for the corresponding flavour, we need to put the flavoured butter in. The best way to do this is to get a spoon, make sure you've just given it a good mix so it's more of a liquid and less of just a clump, and I'm just going to very, very gently and very close to the mixture spoon that in, because I'm trying to not lose any of it. I'm trying to be quick with this as well, because I can see it starting to go, and again you just want to mix that in. And then once you've mixed it, you are left with this sort of still a little bit puffy, you'll be seeing it popping, vanilla Genoese layer. That is the first layer done. I'm now going to go and do the other 2 layers off camera, and we'll come back just before I put it in the oven. They've all condensed a little bit. Again, as I said, nothing we can do about it, and we're just going to move on to putting it in our baking tin casserole dish. Now you may notice that mine doesn't look like the instructions I gave you. Well, this is because I'm somebody that I can't math. In the original Great British Bake Off recipe, where it says fold the foiled parchment to divide the cake tin into 3 even sections, each measuring 20 by 10 centimeters with the parchment facing upwards. I tried it, and I can't do it. I'm not very good at that kind of thing. So if you're like me and you can't do that kind of thing, just line it with baking paper, with parchment paper, and make segments and measure them out, little segments out of tin foil, aluminium foil, and do it that way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grease this thing like you wouldn't believe. I just really don't want this to stick. That's the last thing I want. And in the first video I made of this, I greased it really well and they came out pretty beautifully. So I just rather stick with what I know. Now that that's greased, we want to get these into these 3 separate segments. I'm going to start with the vanilla, put the raspberry in the middle, and put the lemon at the end. And again, you just want to try and stay close to the tin because you really just don't want it flattening even more. I can see just bubbles popping and it's heartbreaking, but there's just nothing you can do. Just take precautions where you can and spread it out as gently as you can, like so. Then raspberry goes in the middle, and then finally your lemon one, same thing. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to pop it in the oven for 12 to 14 minutes. I'll probably check it after 10 and then just reevaluate from there. So whilst that's in the oven, I have a clean mixing bowl, completely clean, completely dried. I have a whisk attachment that's completely clean, completely dried, and I have an egg white in the bowl that I am just going to whisk up into soft peaks. We're back in front of a saucepan while the Genoese is in the oven, and this is making a simple syrup to go with the whisked egg. You should do this while the egg is actually whisking, but again, noise, I'm doing it separately just so that you can see and hear what you have to do. I have this on, this is a milk pan, you just want a little saucepan. I have it on a medium heat, and all I'm going to add to it is water, sweetener, and I'm going to give that a little whisk to just get that sweetener really mixed in. I'm just going to leave that whisking occasionally until it starts to come to a little bit of a gentle simmer. With this now simmering, I'm going to add a sprinkle of my gum. As I said, I'm using Xanthan gum, and what I mean by a sprinkling is, here, let me show you. You see that? That's probably too much. This is really kind of guesswork, but you just sort of want to sprinkle some of that in. I've sprinkled the whole lot in, we'll see what happens. And you want to really make sure that's nice and well whisked. What's going to happen is that the gum is going to want to thicken up and clump, and you have to just fight it as much as you can, nice and quick, and get that mixture well combined. And what will happen is, as it's bubbling up and it's coming to a boil, it'll start thickening a little bit. How thick you want it is, well, thin syrup consistency. You don't want it super thick, but you don't want it water consistency. I've realised there was no point doing this. Now that mine's thickening up and it has come to a boil, I'm literally going to leave it for 45 seconds. Then I'm going to transfer that while it's hot in a nice slow stream into beating egg whites. So we're coming up to the 45-second mark. One thing I forgot to mention is that once you've sort of drizzled this into your beating egg white, you're going to want to just leave it beating until your egg white is all glossy and it has cooled down to room temperature, because it's about to get hotter because of the hot syrup. So my Genoese sponges are now out of the oven, and all I'm going to do is leave them in this casserole dish to cool for 10 minutes. And now as well, my egg white and syrup mixture is nice and glossy. It's at room temperature. It's lovely and sweet. And I'm going to take my butter and I'm just going to add this in portions to the egg mixer. Rebeat it and just keep doing this until I've got a nice, thick, creamy, buttery Italian meringue buttercream. This is my Italian meringue buttercream, all beautiful and fluffy and ready to go. I'm just going to transfer this to a bowl that I can then put in the fridge and just leave to cool until our Genoese is ready and cooled. Oh, just listen to that. It's beautiful, it's fluffy, it's buttery, it's creamy. It tastes amazing. Last step is to make the frosting and then cool that as well. And the frosting is super simple. It's powdered sweetener and water. You mix that together really well. Then what you do is, in a separate little bowl, you put in a couple of spoonfuls of this icing. I said a couple, but I'm spooning in about 100 here. I really don't need to spoon in this much. Like that. And then you add in some of that pink food dye that you used earlier, just to get this a light pinky colour. And then these two, along with the buttercream, are going in the fridge to cool. We're now on the last legs of this recipe, which is assembling it. Now, I'll be honest with you, they shouldn't be that flat. You're going to take your almond flour. They weren't that flat when I last did this. You're then going to take your whey protein, half a teaspoon of baking powder, in the great tradition of failing such simple things on Great British Bake Off that you sit there and you go, I'd never forget that. Why would you forget that? I've forgotten baking powder. These aren't meant to look like this. They're meant to be fluffy and beautiful, and I'm going to show you how to assemble this slabby brick mess. This isn't how it's supposed to look. It's supposed to have the baking powder in it that is in the recipe that I stated at the beginning of the video and completely forgot about. But then I will show you what it's actually supposed to look like. The thing that's actually quite good about this, to be honest, is that there will be people that say this isn't a Genoese sponge because it's got baking powder in it. But look what happens when you don't use baking powder. That's not fluffy. So to assemble your hopefully correctly baked Genoese sponge, you want to put the vanilla down, top it with your raspberry, put the lemon on top, and all you're going to do is just trim edges so that, look at it, it's just crumbling. Anyway, you're going to trim edges until you've got one symmetrical, even block. Now that all your sides are even, you're just gonna take them all off, get your buttercream out the fridge. These two have stuck together. What is going on? Okay, get your buttercream out of the fridge. You're just going to apply a layer to your vanilla. You will have buttercream left over afterwards, which is absolutely fine. This stuff's stunning. I'm so happy with it. Then you're going to put your raspberry one on top of that one and put another layer of buttercream. You're going to want to put your lemon layer on top, push it all together, and then we move on to feathering it. I can't even bring myself to do it with this. I can't even bring myself to do it. I'm rolling some of that out of focus last Elliot so you can see how it's actually supposed to look and not this. You're going to want to get yourself, if you don't have a piping bag, you're going to want to use just a kitchen bag. This coloured one, you want to put that in your icing bag. You're just going to want to close that bag up. You're going to take your white icing and just paint a layer of that on the top. Cut the tiniest little hole in this corner. It's probably too big, knowing me, but we'll find out. So then what you're going to do is just pipe these on in strips about 1 centimetre apart. I'm only going to do 2 strips. So there's 1, and there's 2. Oh, wow, okay. And last but not least, grab yourself a cocktail stick, and all you're going to do is just brush through it. So, like that. Now, this doesn't work as well as I was hoping it would, but I'm working with sweetener, not sugar, so, you know, it's not going to be perfect. Look at that! I'm quite proud of that. So there you have it. If you're interested, the macros for this is that it serves six slices like that. Each slice is 337 calories, 32 grams of fat, 11 grams of protein, and 2 net carbs. This, whilst it's cute and it's still absolutely edible and it is tasty, this is not what it should look like. This is what it should look like. Please, if you make this, don't forget your baking powder. I intend for these Great British Bake Off videos to be out every Thursday or Friday, but please don't hold me to that, because with a new format comes technical issues and things that I just need to work through and make sure that I actually follow, so I don't do things like forget the baking powder. But no matter when they're out in the week, they will be out before the next episode of the Great British Bake Off. So I will see you next week for biscuits. Like this video if you found it interesting, insightful or helpful. Subscribe if you're inclined. Any questions, any comments, any queries, anything down below. Keep calm, keto on. Thanks for watching.